Yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about capital punishment. I know it's supposed to be a chess channel, but I wanted to talk a little bit about capital punishment and what I think about, rehabilitation and so on, and whether capital punishment should be allowed or not. Um, in my opinion, we become more right wing of late because of obviously people have tended to venerate people like Donald Trump. Sorry, Donald Musk. Yeah, I think there actually is a guy called Donald Musk. Is that a writer? Maybe. No, I'm thinking of somebody else. Anyway, yeah, we become more right wing. You've seen like right wing parties in Germany, for example, have unfortunately become quite powerful. A little bit reminds you a little bit of Nazi Germany, right? 1930s. Anyway, I don't want to go off the topic. What about capital punishment? Capital punishment, in my opinion, is immoral. I don't believe the state should act as executioner. For example, a number of problems with capital punishment. Firstly, it's inhumane. In my opinion, it's sick. I think it's sickening that a country like America, which is a civilized nation, still practices capital punishment. There's a lot of people in this country asking for a return to capital punishment. I mean, don't get me wrong. Obviously, if you have a family member murdered by somebody, some of these people are sickos out there, right? I mean, I was watching that Gabby Petito documentary yesterday, and some of the people involved in that, like her boyfriend's family, kind of really sick people. Particularly the boyfriend, who was a narcissist, sociopathic narcissist. Horrible case. Obviously, if that's your daughter, you'd say, well, you want that guy to be executed. As it was, he did himself in, but you'd want that person to be executed. Yeah, so you can understand the emotions running high, but I do think that capital punishment, the state should not act as an executioner. And there are other issues with capital punishment. For example, some of the people sentenced to die by capital punishment aren't necessarily guilty. Another issue is that a lot of them have very low intelligence. They might be mentally ill. They may have been abused themselves. I'm not saying that's an excuse, but they may have had issues when they were younger, being abused by a family member. May come from a very bad background. Obviously, these aren't excuses. Is capital punishment a deterrent? I think the evidence suggests that it isn't. Although America practices capital punishment, there are a lot of other countries that are far more, how shall we say, vigorous. For example, in Saudi Arabia, we take a lot of money from Saudi Arabia, like they sponsored a local football team to this, which is Newcastle United. But they practice aggressive capital punishment, based partly, I believe, on Sharia law. Um, there's a place that's nicknamed Chop Chop Square where they have a swordsman that comes in and cuts people's heads off. Also, I believe they have state executions, public executions. Um, there was a maid who fought back against her employer. That was quite a famous case where she ended up in Chop Chop Square, got her head chopped off. Pretty disturbing cases, right? China also, they do all this capital punishment. They even have these mobile death trucks in China where they basically just drive around, take people out who are been sentenced to death, take them out to a truck, bump them off, and then harvest the organs, right? So some of these cases are pretty sickening. In America, obviously, they have had capital punishment for not in every state, but in a lot of states, like Texas, for example. Now they're having an issue with lethal injections. They've not got the I think it's called something like Pentium bicarbonate or no, the actual drug. Tell I can done a lot of research. They're having trouble getting hold of these supplies, or the countries like Scandinavia are reluctant to send these to America for obvious reasons, because that produce these drugs for obvious reasons, because they know what they're there for, what they're going to be used for. So yeah, so there was a case recently where somebody was killed by carbon monoxide, and that was considered inhumane. Obviously, a lot of these people who have taken, had capital punishment, are obviously not very nice people, because they've committed murders and so on. So there's this limited amount of sympathy you can have for them. But yeah, I mean, there was a case recently where somebody had they had a problem finding a vein to inject this guy. So eventually they gave up. And then they executed him later, like of carbon monoxide poisoning, I believe. But yeah, it's all very sick, the whole thing. And fortunately, in England, we haven't had capital punishment since the 1950s, I believe. Ruth Ellis was a very famous case where she was killed. There was also Derek Bentley. Derek Bentley was this guy who had sort of limited intelligence, and he was like, "Let him have it, Chris." And his friend ended up shooting a police officer, and Derek Bentley was executed for that crime, for just telling him to let him have it. So obviously that was a kind of cause célèbre. I think the Ruth Ellis case was made into something like, can't remember the name of the film. It was something like A Stranger or Beautiful Stranger, or it was played by, maybe, was it Miranda Richardson or something like that in the film? And I believe Rupert Everett played a lover. It was the one she ended up murdering. But yeah, there's loads of cases like this, and it's all pretty sad and sick, really. I should have become a criminologist, actually. But yeah, it's all a bit depressing. But yeah, I do think that we should outlaw capital punishment. And hopefully in 200 years, there won't be capital punishment anywhere in the world. The other thing about prisons is there's too many people in prison. It's costing the state a fortune. A lot of people just want to bang up more prisoners. Could there be a solution in terms of maybe sending people to an island, live there in an island by themselves, a self-governing prison. Maybe self-governing prisons are the answer. Anyway, those are my suggestions. I'm a bit of a bleeding heart liberal, as you can probably tell, but yeah. So let's outlaw capital punishment is my solution to the should we bring in more capital punishment or not. Well, we've already outlawed it in this country, fortunately.